I swear.
President Bush's second inauguration. With the nation at war, the president says the nation must struggle for freedom everywhere.
The survival of liberty in our land increasingly depends on the success of liberty in other lands.
The vision for and the challenges of a second term.
From ABC News, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Reporting tonight from Washington.
Good evening, everyone. From Washington, of course, the formal inauguration ceremonies are over. The president's supporters are dancing the night away at crowded and pretty expensive parties. Mr. Bush will stay up later than is his habit. Americans who demonstrated against the war in Iraq here today have pretty much left this very buttoned-up security zone between the White House and the Capitol, but they are still out there this evening. The president has spoken to the nation and, of course, to the world about his ambitions and his intentions for the next 4 years. Mr. Bush's second term has genuinely begun.
God of our fathers, whose almighty hand.
It was a good day to celebrate the president and the country. Americans were here from every state. Yesterday's snowstorm in Washington was but a memory. The president and his family went first to church, St. John's Episcopal, just across the square from the White House, where the minister urged the president to unite the country, black and brown, gay and straight.
The President of the United States, George Walker Bush.
The political establishment looked west across the mall as a young soprano from Midland, Texas, sang an old familiar hymn.
Bless this door, that it may prove ever open to joy and love.
The Marine Band has played at every inauguration since Thomas Jefferson's in 1801. There was a very warm reception for the Chief Justice William Rehnquist as he walked and smiled his way through the crowd. He has spent months in treatment for thyroid cancer. He was determined to be here to administer the oath. As it was 4 years ago, the First Lady held a family Bible.
I, George Walker Bush,
Do solemnly swear.
do solemnly swear
That I will faithfully execute.
that I will faithfully execute
The office of President of the United States.
the office of President of the United States
And will to the best of my ability.
and will, to the best of my ability,
Preserve, protect, and defend.
preserve, protect, and defend
The Constitution of the United States.
the Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
And the president's authority was renewed. The president's theme was clear, and the president's inaugural address was dominated by his vision of freedom and liberty. Liberty at home, he said, depended on liberty everywhere.
So it is the policy of the United States to seek and support the growth of democratic movements and institutions in every nation and culture with the ultimate goal of ending tyranny in our world.
Mr. Bush acknowledged a divided country, and as he had 4 years ago, he said that he would work for unity.
We have known divisions which must be healed to move forward in great purposes, and I will strive in good faith to heal them. Yet those divisions do not define America.
The country is divided. There were Americans here today opposed to much of what the president stands for, particularly the war in Iraq.
Peace, yes. War, no. Peace, yes. War, no.
But the president spoke to essential American themes. This is a confident man who believes deeply in the mission.
When the Declaration of Independence was first read in public and the Liberty Bell was sounded in celebration, a witness said it rang as if it meant something. In our time, it means something still.
Washington was either very quiet today or in several places noisy with discontent. This woman lost her son in Iraq.
I came here today to try to stand up for the truth. The truth is that the war is a disaster, that it's based on lies.
The demonstrators never got very close to the president. There was no threat, but they could be heard. Our White House correspondent was in the motorcade.
Things are now being thrown at the motorcade, which is making us conservatives very nervous. This is actually a very healthy-sized protest and very angry, as you can tell.
And there were also thousands of the president's supporters. By the time he got close to the White House, it was, as planned, time to get out and walk a bit. And after the president and the family had settled into the reviewing stand, finally, the parade got seriously underway. Nearly 11,000 people who had saved and worked hard to be here. 40 bands and a wide array of floats for everyone here today in one way or another. This was an important day. At any inauguration, there are always mixed emotions, not including, of course, the particular passions that they're here today about the war in Iraq. But the people who won are really happy. And after a close election, that was certainly true for Republicans here today. There is, too, you saw it here today, a feeling of oneness as the country celebrates continuity and a stable political process. Here again is our White House correspondent, Terry Moran.
From the grand vista of the Capitol steps, Mr. Bush addressed much of his speech to audiences far away.
Today, America speaks anew to the peoples of the world.
Amid all his ringing rhetoric today, the president made several explicit and expansive foreign policy commitments that he claimed will bind his administration to Democratic activists anywhere in the world.
The United States will not ignore your oppression or excuse your oppressors. When you stand for your liberty, we will stand with you.
And to repressive governments.
We will encourage reform in other governments by making clear that success in our relations will require the decent treatment of their own people.
Those sweeping promises of how foreign policy will be run in a second Bush administration will be met with skepticism overseas, in part because of U.S. support of repressive regimes such as Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Pakistan.
I think the president's speech is bold, it's noble, but it is also an invitation for the rest of the world to constantly point out how the United States falls short. And how we are being hypocritical.
On the home front, Mr. Bush was no less grandiose, promising his answer to Lyndon Johnson's Great Society.
We will bring the highest standards to our schools and build an ownership society. We will widen the ownership of homes and businesses, retirement savings, and health insurance.
Here, too, the president's ambition sparks questions.
He has created a very heavy second-term domestic agenda. Can he do it? Undoubtedly, he can't do all of it.
Democrats, who are just itching to take this president down a notch or two, will certainly have something to say about that, as will America's allies and adversaries abroad. But the spirit here tonight, Peter, was best captured by one of the president's old Texas friends who said the best way to get a Texan to do something is to tell him he can't.
Many thanks, Terry. Terry Moran, back at the White House this evening. ABC's George Stephanopoulos has been with us all day. George, one thing that struck me, I think it struck you as well, there was not a single mention of the word Iraq in the president's address.
Not once in 2,000 words. Of course, the mission in Iraq suffused the speech, Peter. This was an idealistic speech, as Terry Moran said, about advancing liberty throughout the world. And Iraq is the chief battleground right now. And the president's success over these next 4 years and into history will be determined by Iraq. But the president didn't talk too much at all about constraints today. He set out that expansive vision for the government here at home, but did not mention the budget deficit or how we're going to achieve it. Today was the day for idealism, not realism.
Many thanks, George, very much. George Stephanopoulos. Tomorrow when Congress really reconvenes, political battle begins in earnest. But we're going to go now to Iraq. There was an audio tape that surfaced today apparently from Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, the man the U.S. blames for many attacks in the country. And on the tape, Zarqawi calls U.S. forces arrogant American tyrants and says the insurgents are crushing their morale. Our national security correspondent, Martha Raddatz, who is normally based at the Pentagon here in Washington, is with U.S. troops in Iraq today.
10 days before elections, U.S. troops are stepping up security throughout Iraq. In Baghdad, main roads were blocked after yesterday's series of car bombings. To the north, in the troubled city of Mosul, commanders said they fear large-scale attacks in the next 10 days.
There is every attempt to intimidate everyone connected with the election.
Security will make voting complicated. Vehicles will not be allowed near polling places. Voters must walk, in some cases more than a mile. In Mosul, a city of 2 million people, only 40 polling places will be open. Plans for 60 more had to be scrapped when election workers quit because they were too afraid. At each polling place, at least 3 Iraqi police officers will be inside and at least 10 Iraqi troops outside.
The Iraqi forces will be backed up by American troops. The U.S. has sent the largest number of American forces into Mosul that have been here in nearly a year.
That's more than 3,500 soldiers. Still, the bulk of the security will be provided by the Iraqis. Commanders say the troops have greatly improved. They will almost certainly be tested on Election Day. Martha Raddatz, ABC News, Mosul.
Fair to say we think that at some point today here in Washington, the war in Iraq was on everyone's mind. When the president spoke, when the anti-war demonstrators shouted as the president went by, when one or another military unit did something here today as part of the celebration. And we thought too of the many wounded at the Army hospital here, watching it all on television. And in Rockport, Texas today, just about the time the president was speaking, there was a funeral for a young Marine reservist. 21-year-old Matthew Holloway was killed in Iraq last week by a roadside bomb. His brother told a local paper that as much as Matthew wanted to be home, he was very proud of what he was doing in Iraq, and it is something you hear from so many people in the services, including the 10,000 who have already been wounded. When we come back this evening, on Inauguration Day, there was unprecedented security here. We'll talk about the protesters and the parade. We'll also talk tonight briefly about the Bush political dynasty. They don't like the word. And also tonight, the new technology that might have helped reveal some of the 9/11 hijackers before it happened.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by Nasonex.
Well, it was a lengthy celebration here today. If you were anywhere near a television set, you saw the first family go to church, leave the church. You saw them have lunch with the Congress. Of course, you saw the president's inaugural address. What really struck many people here today was the president's journey from the Capitol back to the White House, because the tension was extraordinarily evident. Here's ABC's Lisa Starr.
This was the first inauguration since the 9/11 attacks, and it was designated a national special security event. It had the tightest security ever, with almost 13,000 police, military, and federal agents on hand. And around the presidential motorcade, as it inched along Pennsylvania Avenue, that virtual army of vehicles and Secret Service agents.
The parade is supposed to be spontaneous, cheerful. This looked like a banana republic worried about a restive tank regiment at the edge of town. It was unworthy of the occasion.
Compared this picture to the same event in 1993 when Bill Clinton first took office, and in 1977 when President Jimmy Carter felt comfortable enough to walk nearly the entire parade route. This year, the President and First Lady did walk the final few steps, but with much more security than during the same walk 4 years ago. One presidential historian wondered at the message today's pictures conveyed.
One message it may send to people who do not wish us well is that they have succeeded in making America a less free place.
The Secret Service refused to respond to questions about whether the extreme security was too much, saying only that it was pleased with the results of the security planning. But others questioned whether this part of the parade should continue.
If this is necessary, let's use the next 4 years. Someone should be deputed to rethink the idea of the presidential parade, because this is not attractive.
The presidential procession dates back to George Washington's inauguration, and tradition is hard to change. Lisa Stark, ABC News, Washington.
When our broadcast in Washington continues tonight, we're going to look at some of the new computer programs that sift through vast amounts of information about our lives as we try to reach a balance between security and civil liberties. We were reminded many times today of the government's tricky balancing act since 9/11, how to provide security and enable Americans still to enjoy their traditional freedoms. Later this evening in an ABC News special, we will show you what impact some of the new technologies are having not only on security but on our daily lives. For one thing, I went to Las Vegas to meet a man who has designed one of the newest information systems. And we talked to Jeff Jonas about the attacks on 9/11. What strikes me about the hijackers on 9/11 was how little the country knew about them.
Well, taking a look retrospectively at the 19 hijackers, our government knew about Nawak al-Hamzi and Khalid al-Mihdhar.
This is what Jonas means by non-obvious relationships. Two of the attackers, Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Mihdhar, were already on government watch lists.
We knew they were involved in the Cole bombing. And on August 23rd of 2001, the CIA tells the INS and the FBI and the Coast Guard not to let them in. They're bad guys. The problem is they were already here. So now we're looking for them, and on August 25th and 27th, they make plane reservations using their real names.
And al-Mihdhar gave an address also used by Marwan al-Shehi and Mohammed Atta, two of the hijacker pilots.
Mohammed Atta's plane reservation, he uses a phone number which ties you to 5 more.
Nawaf al-Hazmi used the same address as Salim al-Hazmi. And surprisingly, some of them even used the same frequent flyer number.
So it turns out that by knowing just a few, 1 or 2, if you pull the thread, you end up finding 13 of the 19.
It's just an excerpt from our special later this evening. It's called No Place to Hide. It's 10 o'clock Eastern Time. It's about how government is harnessing technology in the name of security and what it means to all Americans in their individual lives. When our broadcast largely tonight about the inauguration continues, a big day for the Bush family. And like it or not, they are a political dynasty. They don't like the word. Finally, this evening, it is true the Bushes don't like the word dynasty. One of the president's advisors told us today it sends the wrong message about entitlement. But there it is. The U.S. has a history of powerful families with an enduring role in public life. Here's ABC's Dan Harris on the Bush dynasty.
A day of personal and historical significance for the Bushes, who are now, historians say, firmly enshrined in the pantheon of powerful political families.
Whether one likes it or not, has to consider that the Bushes are the most successful political dynasty in American political history.
In terms of time in office, more successful than John Adams and his son John Quincy Adams, both one-term presidents. More successful, too, than the Kennedys, who spent about 1,000 days in the White House. By the time the current president leaves office, a Bush will have been in the White House for 12 of the last 20 years. Peter Schweizer, a Bush family biographer, says the Bushes pride themselves on being the un-Kennedys. Minimal glitter and glamour, Crawford, not Camelot.
They do measure themselves against the Kennedys. They do want to achieve greater political success than the Kennedys, and I think that they confidently believe that they have done so.
The Bushes do not sit around and count themselves or their own achievements. They were taught, and it's in their DNA, not to brag. They don't brag.
The Roosevelts, Teddy and his cousin Franklin, spent more time in the Oval Office than the Bushes, almost 20 years. But their power lasted only one generation. The Bush dynasty started in 1952 with Prescott Bush, the senator from Connecticut. Both his son and grandson have become president.
The Bushes have succeeded in part by adapting to the times. Prescott Bush, the patriarch, was a moderate New England Republican. His grandson, the current president, is a Southern social conservative.
Can this dynasty continue? There's buzz about the presidential aspirations of the president's brother, Florida Governor Jeb Bush, and Jeb's son, George P. Bush. Ultimately, the future of this dynasty may depend on how well George W. Bush fares in this second term, whether he leaves the Bush brand burnished or battered. Dan Harris, ABC News, Washington.
And that is our report on World News Tonight. There'll be more on Nightline later this evening. I'm Peter Jennings. Thank you for joining us, and good night from Washington.